Grounded is a video game where we play a shrunken human teenager, so obviously it's not going to be 100% realistic. That doesn't mean, however, that realism should be completely abandoned. After seeing this little guy in my bathroom, I spent a few hours thinking about all the things in Grounded that aren't realistic, but could be. First up, why doesn't the grass grow taller in the backyard? Now, this would make sense if we were stuck in a time loop. However, with the recent addition to this cutscene that was added in the homestretch update, where time clearly passes by when we go to sleep, whether it's during the day or night, you'll see a different cutscene. It does appear that time is passing and we're not stuck in a time loop. If you look at your game save, it's going to show you how many days you've been played. So it seems like in the game, time is passing by. So for that reason, it wouldn't make sense for the grass not to grow. I guess one other argument could be because there's no rain in the game and the sprinklers don't turn on, or at least we don't see them turning on, that perhaps the grass is not getting water and therefore isn't growing. But realistically, I don't think that really matters. So in Grounded, what I would expect is, at the very least, for the grass to grow at a slow rate over time and not just be the exact same height forever. Next up, why can't bugs walk up everything? Now, if we go back to that picture I showed in the intro, this is a silverfish that's been in my bathroom. It was on the wall originally up in the top corner against the ceiling, and now it's just hanging from the ceiling. So obviously in real life, bugs can walk up walls. Honestly, you can see ants, spiders, any kind of centipedes, whatever kind of bugs you might have in your house or around your house, beetles, they will be able to walk up walls for the most part, and some of them can even walk upside down on ceilings. In Grounded, however, the only bugs that can actually do anything remotely close to this is aphids, which can walk up grass. Now, they did have the ability for some bugs to jump, which I think that was put in place to prevent people from cheesing, although, as I've shown many times on my live streams, this is still possible. You can cheese pretty much every bug in the game if you know how to do it properly. I think what would make sense is if the bugs could actually walk up things, such as the roots on the tree or walking up rocks or even your buildings. This would prevent cheesing. This would also make the game much more interesting, in my opinion, much more dangerous, honestly, because if you wouldn't be able to hide safely on top of a tall structure, either that you built or that was in the game, like the flower pot when I've showed killing the infected wolf spider, or climbing up on top of just even like anywhere, like even on the deck. Imagine you're on the deck and you're shooting down and a spider just runs up the deck and comes after you. That would be super interesting in my opinion. And this comes from someone who is just pretty much terrified of spiders in general, especially in real life. Don't really want to have to deal with them if I don't have to. But I think that would make the game much more interesting. It would also make base defenses, which is one of my favorite parts of the game, much more interesting if instead of having the bugs just walk up and walk directly into my spike traps, if they could actually just walk up the walls, or if you don't even have spike traps, they just walk up to your walls and just sit there and start attacking them. Why attack the walls when you could just walk straight up? If the ants or the spiders could walk straight up the walls and get inside of your base and get to the good stuff that you're trying to defend, that would just make the game much more interesting and much more challenging. Why do bugs always respawn in the same spot and in the same numbers? Now, a few weeks ago, I had an ant raid of my own in my actual house. In my kitchen, I had a bunch of ants on my countertop. I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. So what I ended up doing was I looked around and I figured out where they were coming from. They were coming from this little tiny crack or something in the windowsill. So what I did was I went to the store, bought some ant killer, put it down, and guess what happened? All the ants came, all the ants ate the ant killer, they went back, and then they were gone for a while. They did come back a second time, a few of them, not many of them, and then now they've been gone. It's been weeks since they've been here because guess what? They're gone. Once you kill a bug in real life, that bug is gone forever. Now, obviously in a video game, if you killed all the enemies and there was just none left and they never respawned, that wouldn't make the game really make much sense. It would just be too easy, right? But in Grounded, every time you kill a bug, they come back in like, it seems like 2 to 3 days max, sometimes less, it seems like. I don't know. At the most, it seems like 3 days. I'll go around, kill all the wolf spiders, and next thing you know, it's like they're all back again in the exact same spots. What I think would make sense is rather than having the exact same bugs spawn in the exact same spots all the time, I think it would make more sense if after you kill them, they take much longer to come back, which would then give you time to go to those areas and explore them freely without having to worry about being assaulted by a bug that you thought you killed but now has come back. And it would also make sense if maybe they came from different yards or something like that, and they came into the yard, so they'd be in different parts of the map, thus making it, when you're exploring the map, you never know what you're going to run into, which would be realistic. If you walk out in your backyard, I can assure you if you go out into your yard or a park or any type of grassy area near you or a bush, something like that, garden, you're going to walk out there, you're going to see some bugs in it. If you go back 2 or 3 days later, more likely than not, those bugs are probably not going to be in the exact same spots. They're not going to be wandering the same spots. So I think that would make the Grounded backyard much more interesting if after you've gone through your initial run through of the map and gone through all the places and cleared it out, if when you go back to old places, you'd have no idea what was actually going to be there, and it would just make the game much more challenging, much more interesting. Why does food always respawn in the same spots in the backyard? This includes the human food, the candy pieces such as the mints and the spicy cha-chas, as well as the salt growing in the same places and also spawning in the same places, and then the gum respawns in the exact same spots. This doesn't make any sense, at least from my perspective, unless there's someone actually in the yard actively putting that stuff in there. And I think it'll be quite obvious to us if there was a normal-sized human being walking around the yard. Now, I think the way it's supposed to work is that people are throwing food over the fence. And that would make sense at the beginning if there was food thrown over the fence the first time that you went around and got it. However, after you cleaned it up, what's the chances that if someone's throwing food over your fence, it's going to land in the exact same spot, or that somehow gum's going to be stuck under the exact same spot, or that the little mints are going to be back in the containers in certain spots, like in the upper yard where the mints are in the containers. They respawn there every couple of days. Not sure if that's intended, but that's how it works. This doesn't make any sense to me. Now, of course, we wouldn't want to have a limited supply of these resources because then that would make the game just super tedious. You'd have to be really careful in what you're upgrading and what you're using them for. So there is a way of actually making this make sense. And for me, that would be to use the ants. Now, currently, if you go into the anthills, there will be mints in them sometimes. But why wouldn't it make sense for the ants to also take back other food? If you go over by the black anthill, at least the last time I went over there, I think there was like a bug where all the ants were just dumping all the food in one spot over by the trash bags. But wouldn't it make sense if the ants would just go around and randomly come back with food, or maybe it would just spawn in their mouth? Like if we're not around, if we're outside the render distance, they would just have food. They would take the food pieces back to their little hills. It would give us a reason to go back to their ant hills. It would also make sense for why it would be there, because ants do go around and collect food. As I mentioned earlier, when the ants were in my kitchen, what they were doing was they were coming in and looking for food to take back to the hill. That's what they do. So in Grounded, what they could do is have the food spawns in after we destroy it. After that, next thing, if we want human food or mint pieces or spicy cha-chas and stuff like that, rather than having them spawn in the exact same spots, they could spawn in the ant hills, or we could find ants walking around with them in their mouths. Next up, how do the juice boxes and soda cans continue to produce liquid forever? Now, we can't see in the juice boxes, obviously, so there could be quite a bit of juice in there. However, the soda cans, we can enter into them, and we can clearly see that they're not filled with soda. In fact, there's usually like 1, 2, 3 drops inside of them. Once we collect them, it doesn't make sense for, at least for the soda cans, to be refilled. The juice boxes I could see dripping periodically over a certain amount of time. That would make sense if they dripped like once every couple days or something like that, so that was a continual source of them for a certain amount of time. However, it doesn't make any sense because they drip forever. I have 500 plus days in my main save, and no matter what, the juice boxes are always going to be dripping juice. The soda cans are always going to have soda in them, and that doesn't make any sense. However, this could make sense, similar to what we were talking about earlier with the human food being thrown in the yard. It would make more sense if there was new juice boxes or soda cans just randomly appearing in the yard that had these inside of them. That way you could continue to use them over time, but periodically they could just appear in the yard in different places and have the new sources of juice and soda. How does the weed killer never run out? The weed killer canister is enormous, and of course it has a hole in the top of it, so it makes sense realistically for the gas to be leaking out of it. What doesn't make sense is the gas leaks out of it forever. And by forever, I mean I've played hundreds of in-game days on saves, and the gas will continue to leak out. I don't think there's any point in time currently where it will stop leaking out, and this doesn't make any sense. Of course, you can stop it yourself by plugging it up, which will trigger the cutscene, and then it'll show the infected bugs and stuff like that spreading around, and the infected spores and stuff like that. They will spread around the map into different areas. I think what would make sense would be, after a certain number of in-game days, if a player has chosen not to plug it up, the gas would just stop coming out because it would have depleted itself, and the same effect would happen. It could even have a cutscene of its own where it would just show the gas stopping, and then it would show the infected bugs and the infected spores popping up around the yard like it does with the current cutscene. How is the weather the exact same every single day? The game takes place in the South Midwest of the United States per the developers, and having lived in the United States myself for my entire life, I can speak from experience to say there's nowhere in the country, especially not in that region of the country, where there's going to be 365 consecutive days of sunny weather with perfect temperatures. It's just not going to happen. That part of the country is going to have wild changes in temperature depending on the seasons. It's going to have rain, snow, sleet. There's going to be windy days and cloudy days. It's in Tornado Alley, so there theoretically could be tornadoes. At the very least, there's probably going to be severe thunderstorms. And what I'm saying is, it doesn't make any sense for the game to have perfect weather every single day. Now, I know adding weather to the game would be a huge challenge. Honestly, I was hoping it would be the secret feature that was added in the last update, the home stretch update. That didn't happen. In fact, it was shared worlds instead. But what I'm hoping is in the 1.0 update, we get a huge surprise and they add weather to the game, because I think that would be one of the things that would make the most sense to be added. It would also have the most impact on the game and just make the game just a completely fresh experience for those of us that have put hundreds or thousands of hours into the game. Let me know what you think about these 7 questions in the comments, and if you like this video, here's another video you should watch where I discuss if Dr. Wendell Tully is the final boss.